Welcome to the Leadership is Female podcast. Dalia Feldheim, author of Dare to Lead Like a Girl, How to Survive and Thrive in the Corporate Jungle, and the marketing executive who spearheaded the Run Like a Girl campaign. We are thrilled to have you on this podcast all the way from Israel. Welcome, Dalia.
Thank you so much, Emily. It's lovely being here.
So tell us who you are and what you do.
Who I am. So I'm a mom. I'm a mom of three. I have a 20-year-old, 19-year-old, and 14-year-old. I spent 21 years in the corporate world as a senior marketing executive, first with P&G and then another Fortune 500 company as a CMO Asia. Most recently, 5 years ago, I pivoted my career to become an organizational psychologist. And today I work with companies, the tech industry to basically leadership development programs. How can we bring more of purpose and joy back into the workplace? That's in short.
Yeah, in short, but let's go in the way back machine here, because before we dig into your career as a marketer, I want to talk about you as a person. You're a citizen of Israel. You began your career as a platoon commander in the Israeli Defense Forces, an apt preparation for intense leadership roles. What was it like starting your career as a woman in the military?
Oh, so in Israel, sadly, it is compulsory for men as well as women. But for me, I always knew that if I do something, I give it my whole heart. So I decided to be a platoon commander. And very quickly, I realized that my passion is, people development. So I had a platoon of about 200 women. It was the basic training. And I think I call it my crash course in perseverance, my crash course in leadership, because really, whether you have life and death situations or simple cases like one of my soldiers, misbehaved and I was told to throw her into, prison. And I decided, I asked to give her a second chance, and I basically drilled her throughout the night. That's kind of but during those drills, I was actually speaking to her and, this is your opportunity to serve the army as equal. And by the end of that evening, she broke down into tears. And the next day, when I went into the cafeteria, basically she got everyone up to salute me. And the emotional piece there, that she turned around and became the best soldier ever. And we stayed in touch for a few years. And that basically kind of was my first course in, motivation of people. Doesn't matter where they come from. Really, how can we take the best in people and make them, help them be the best that they can be? So yes, it was kind of, a challenge, but I am really proud that here, women and men, serve as equal. So I got the chance to kind of experience, and what can I say? I hope my kids do not need to do the army, because that there would be global peace, but it is a character building. So in that sense, it was quite a meaningful experience for me.
Yeah, it sounds very meaningful, and what an amazing leadership story to lay the foundation really of your career. And quickly, let's skip over the meat of this conversation to talk about the fact that you're an adjunct professor of the science of happiness at the Singapore Management University, and you're the founder of Uppiness, an online game to promote well-being at work in partnership with Dr. Tal Ben Shahar and the Happiness Studies Academy. I'm so curious about Uppiness. Tell us about the game and how players can benefit.
So, it was really interesting when after 21 years in the marketing role, leadership experience, I had great experiences and also really challenging ones that we'll talk about later. But I met Tal Ben Shahar when I was given a talk, my very first kind of talk. And I remember he sat down at the back, and at the end of the talk, he came to me because we're both from Israel. So we befriended. And he told me, Dalia, you need to speak on TED and you need to write on a book. And I remember I kind of turned around, my stories are any girl next door. And he said, well, that's why it's so relevant. So he became my second career mentor. And then he invited me to join him to study positive psychology. And I can tell you, it's an 18-month course. It's kind of 4 trainers. And when I studied the course, I basically realized that everything that I believed intuitively about leadership was grounded in research. And that was kind of really an eye-opener for me. So I decided to pivot my career and, from a marketeer, go back to psychology, because that's why I started. I started with psychology and business and really focused on psychology in the workplace. And that kind of one thing led to another. And, I was invited to create a course for Singapore Management University. And I took everything that I learned from my own experience, the academic course that I did, and I really brought it together to create a course that was very academically, profound, but also very practical. And I'll tell you, before I get into happiness, I'll tell you that I remember, what made me pivot my career, because I was kind of experimenting with different directions. I did a workshop for my students on Find Your Purpose. It's still my favorite workshop until today. And one of the students raised his hand and he said, Prof, I need to tell you something, thank you so much. I now know what my purpose is, but I know I need to be a corporate slave for a few years and then I'll do what I love. And I can tell you, Emily, that made my hair stand up because I knew it doesn't have to be that way. And that little student really propelled me to change kind of how I'm thinking about my next career, and basically decided to dedicate my career to working with companies to understand what was working so amazingly well at P&G. So I created this course that is based on the university course. My first client was Netflix, and then Microsoft, and then Google. And basically it's a year-long leadership development course. It starts, it combines storytelling and the science and very practical tip. But I wanted a way to finish the course in a fun and kind of graduation. And that's when I met my partner, Oren Appel. He created an offline game. And I told him, this is amazing. I want it online. And he's like, why don't you partner with me? And we co-created. So I went back to Tal Ben Shahar. He loved the idea. So we basically took the basis of the offline, but made it much more profound academically. And the idea is basically a way for employees to learn the principles of positive psychology in a fun, entertaining, it's serious play. And we know the best way to learn is to teach, and the second best way is to play. So basically the game goes on for about an hour. An employee either gets a card with a business challenge or a cultural challenge that they're facing, or they can bring their own challenge. And then the others get cards with solutions from the world of positive psychology with research facts. And then they need to pitch that solution to the issue owner. And I can tell you, we've played, thousands of managers until today. And what really every time I'm surprised and happy to see that hiding behind a game, people can go really deep. We talk bullying at work, we talk burnout, we talk mental health. And people are really kind of, A, I can ask for help, and B, I get different pieces of advice. So super excited. We have now about 100 happiness trainers that can train anywhere in the world. So anyone who listening who wants to run the game can check out happiness.com. And yeah, it's been a great way to help companies bring it. It can be as a happy hour, but also at the end of a leadership course like I'm using it. So it's been an amazing experience, and I didn't plan to be a startup entrepreneur, but here I am. And I'm loving it.
Yeah, the game sounds so impactful, and I'll make sure and link all the websites in the show notes so that the audience can make sure and dig in further. But I want to talk about also the campaign. So the campaign that began your career revolution. As a marketing executive for 17 years at Procter and Gamble, you spearheaded some of the world's most iconic marketing campaigns, including the Always #LeadLikeAGirl, the 2014 winner of 14 Cannes Awards and Forbes 2020 10 most influential campaigns of the century. Now, I remember this campaign. It brings tears to my eyes just thinking about it. And I definitely rewatched the commercial preparing for this interview today. And it was just as eye-opening all these years later as it was when I first saw it on TV. So take us through the creation of this campaign from ideation to execution. How did it come to life? And what do you feel was the impact?
Well, I think it's really interesting to tell you about the campaign. I actually need to step a little bit backwards. I started my career, on feminine care. And everywhere I went, I realized that, I'm not in the business of selling pads. I'm in the business of women empowerment. I'll tell you one story that kind of was probably the most impactful. Um, I was in India. I was the global marketing director responsible for Asia. India was my biggest market. I walked into this in-home visit and I see the girl sitting on the floor. Her mom comes in with drinks and she serves us, and then she bends over and she serves her daughter on the floor. You know, I noticed she sat against this blue wall that was faded as if she sits there quite often. Now, towards the end of the interview, aunts and uncles came in, and for a moment when her uncle came in, I noticed a sad, almost embarrassed look on the girl's face. When we left, I said to my agency, "What was that all about?" And she said, "Well, she's on her period." And I said, "So what?" And then she said, "Well, in India, we have all these myths about periods. We believe women on their period are impure. So they're not allowed to go into a kitchen. And often they don't sleep with the family and they sit on the floor and so on and so on." And then she kind of jokingly said, "Hey, we even believe a woman, if she touches pickles, she'll make them go sour." I can tell you, Emily, that night I didn't sleep. I just kept on having that sad, frustrated look, embarrassed, right? Imagine these girls so embarrassed already, right? And then, everyone sees they're on their period and they end up missing school a week, a month. And we talk about equality. How can we keep equal when you're staying away a week, a month? So anyway, the next morning I called the agency. I'm like, I couldn't sleep. She said, "Well, me too, actually. I researched it. It's quite common here in India." So I said, "Listen, I'm a foreigner, but I feel like we need to use the voice of our brands to make an impact. I want to see what we can do about it, how we can, debunk these myths." And 10 months later, we came up with a campaign called "I Dared, I Touched the Pickle." We decided to use humor. Basically, it was a granddaughter telling her grandma, "I did, I touched a pickle." So that kind of started the work. That was back in 2012. And then I brought it up to the global team and I said, "Listen, we're not in the business of selling pads. We're in the business of women empowerment." And together with my, president at the time and the 4 global marketing directors there, we said, "Okay, how can we create a campaign that really is, elevates the brand benefit towards the life benefit of women empowerment?" Now, I thank you for saying I spearheaded it. We were 4 marketing directors. I give the credit to my president, who actually one day she told the agency a story about her daughter who was on her period and she didn't want to play basketball. And, my president just told her daughter, "Hey, you go out there and you play it like a girl." And that sentence kind of got caught up by the agency and they came up with the campaign. So I give credit also to the agency. We created the brief and elevated it to a life benefit. They came up with the campaign. And I can tell you, just as you cried when you saw it, I remember seeing it for the first time. Literally, tears were in my eyes, but I also said to myself, this is what I've been working for all this career. And what happened afterwards was beyond our beliefs. Basically, we didn't have any money. It was the end of the fiscal year, and yet we managed to persuade everyone to air it. It was end of June. Then it went on the Super Bowl. It was the first Femke ad ever to be, aired on the Super Bowl. And I can tell you, as a marketing director, I'm super proud of the business result. But as a mom of 3, as I told you, what I'm most proud of is, a year ago or 2 years ago, 6 years after the campaign first aired, my youngest called me from school all excited. "Mom, you won't believe it. They're showing your ad in social studies." Really more than a commercial, it became an icon for women empowerment. And, I'm really proud of many things in my career, but this India work and later the global work is, where I believe, and that's an example that I use today about bringing purpose to the workplace. And that's what I advocate today. I always knew that I was passionate about people and insights. And it's really, how can you, every person listening in, really understand what you're passionate about, what you're good at, and then how can you bring it to life in what you're doing every day? So, making an impact. I was very kind of grateful for being able, even as a marketing director, to make such a social impact. So that kind of was the inspiration. And later on, having spent 2 decades in leadership role, I want to reclaim the phrase "like a girl" once again, and this time in the world of leadership. And for those who didn't see the commercial, you know, we asked a young girl what it means to run like a girl, and she said, "What do you mean? It means run as fast as you can," right? But something changes during puberty, and suddenly it becomes an insult. And just as we reclaim the phrase to mean simply be proud to be who you are, in the same way, I want to reclaim lead like a girl to mean, you know, lead from your heart, be proud to lead like yourself with passion and authenticity. So that was the inspiration.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing so many of those stories from a global perspective, because I think we are oftentimes unaware of what women are going through in these other countries when we're thinking about what's happening in our own. And that was just so eye-opening to hear about that girl in India, and then how that led to this campaign that really changed a lot of hearts and minds, and still has legs today, that it's
Yeah,
being
amazing.
talked about in social studies. And to reclaim the lead like a girl phrase, I love that. What does it mean to lead like a girl?
So, you know, what inspired actually some of the research in the book was a research by Harvard Business Review. Basically, in 2012, they did research to try and understand how come we don't have more senior women in senior roles? Are women not as effective as men? And they did this research back then, and they found, yes, women are as effective as men. Now, they repeated that research once more in 2019. And this time, they found that not only were women as effective as men, but they were actually scoring higher than men in 17 out of 19 leadership traits. Now, these include some that we traditionally think of as women traits, like empathy and intuition and teamwork, but it also includes things like creativity and stretch goals. And, you know, so basically, you know, that's why I say, why does lead like a girl still sound like an insult? Now, I do say my book is about women empowerment, but it's not about women versus men per se, because I do know there's no such thing as a masculine brain or a feminine brain. The issue is, I mean, there's traits, leadership traits that historically were considered feminine, like empathy, intuition. There's traits that historically considered masculine, right? Like logic and decision making and direction. A good leader needs to be rotating between the two. The issue is that the business world sunk into what, you know, Raz Sisotan, my friend who created conscious capitalism, they call it in the book, him and Nilima Bhatt, they call it in their book wounded masculine. Wounded masculine is where, you know, power over people versus power with people. So my goal with this book is to shift the pendulum, right? So more leaders, men as well as women, you know, connect to those softer skill, those historically considered feminine traits, and, you know, dare to lead more like a girl. More like a girl, basically, it means leads from your heart. So I have in my book a 5P model. Okay, I come from marketing, so it's easy to remember. So the 5P, the first I spoke with about is purpose, right? And the importance of understanding what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and how you can bring it to work every single day. The second is really perspective. And this is about, you know, as, you know, women, as leaders, asking for directions, okay? Not assuming we know the reality of other people, asking for what we need, right? The third is the physical wellness. And this is something that is as relevant for men as well as women, right? It's how do we make sure today it's not about managing time, it's about managing energy. So how do we make sure we take care of ourselves? And as women, we're not that good at self-care. You know, to say I love you, you need to be able to say I, right? It's putting the oxygen mask on yourself before you can put it on others. So all of this, and I call that model, you know, better me: breathing, eating, touch, recovery, and movement. So that's kind of the physical element. The fourth P is really about people, and that's the secret. If you listeners only remember one thing for today, what's the secret to happiness? You know, Martin Seligman, who is the father of positive psychology, did this longitudinal research, 75 years, and they found the number one driver of happiness is the quality of our relationships, right? So how do you as a leader foster those relationships. That is a critical element. A leader that is not good with people should not be promoted. A manager, sorry, that is not good with people should not be promoted to be a leader. In P&G, we had a very simple methodology. You got a rating on building the business and you got a rating on building the organization. And if you were not top rated in both, you would not get promoted. So that's the fourth B. And then the fifth B is positivity. And positivity is not about being happy all the time. Positivity is about giving ourselves the permission to be human. And I think, leading from the heart is being emotionally brave, understanding, that we have a range of emotions, and, the only people that are not sad or psychopath or dead people. So if you're sad, it means you're normal. So how do we, yesterday was Are You Okay Day? How do we as leaders really spend time, checking in with our team? Are we okay? But really stopping to listen, really going above and beyond to understand sometimes it's okay not to be okay. And how can we help our employees deal with grief, or, bring in, but also then help them see the light. And, there's a whole concept of upward spiral of positivity. It's not about fixing it, because if you need to sit with grief, you need to sit with grief, and there's no way to accelerate it. So what do you need now? How can I help? And then later on, what could be opportunities? The best positive upward spiral of positivity is gratitude. What is working in our life? How can we accentuate that? Giving back, kindness is an amazing enabler on the upward spiral. Hope. So all of those, and my last chapter in the book is about a concept called post-traumatic growth. Everyone knows about post-traumatic stress disorder, right? But post-traumatic growth is actually 3 times more likely to happen. And that's really when not only do you bounce back to the same level you were before, but you actually grow from your hardships. And, I think that's what I've been trying to do in myself. So the book is really about, personal stories with the facts and figures, and then what you can do to lead more from the heart.
There were two things that, well, everything was amazing. And I think we all need to get this book, Dare to Lead Like a Girl, How to Survive and Thrive in the Corporate Jungle. But there were two things that you said that really stuck out to me. The one was the fourth P in the 5P model, the people, and the number one secret. And I think a lot of listeners here are probably nodding their head saying, this is such a big issue, is oftentimes people are promoted into management levels because of longevity. So it's time. So let's give you the title and the raise and move you into that position. And that doesn't mean because they put in the time that they're going to be a good manager. So I really love what you highlighted there, the discipline of P&G to do those tests on both performance and the way that you are with people in order to earn that promotion. I think we can learn a lot from that.
Yeah. And I think it's so simple, and so many companies talk about it, but don't really deliver on it. So,
Yeah.
and the good thing, the really exciting news in all of this, and why I do what I do, is that all of these skills can be taught. You can teach yourself to have more empathy. You can teach yourself to be a good people leader. You can teach yourself to be to create a coaching environment, to create psychological safety. And I can say it's not that P&G, I mean, there were no kind of challenging managers there, but it's just the culture was such where, the expectation was for you to invest in building your people and in creating a coaching environment. So I think that's kind of a key dimension that, too many companies move a manager to a leader without giving them any training. So that's my training. My training is, from manager to leader, all the skills that you need to know, okay, in order to become a good leader. How do you give feedback, right? How do you create a psychologically safe environment? So sadly, we do see too many assholes in the workplace being promoted. Sorry for my language. But the good news is if HR and, the systems come together, we can teach ourselves to be, great leaders. And that's kind of, I know assholes do not want to stay assholes. Sometimes it's a matter of awareness. Sometimes it's a matter of management expectations. And that's where I think we have a role in companies to really set expectations that the role of senior role levels, you're not managing the business anymore. You're managing the people who manage the business.
It's so true. And the second piece that really stuck out to me was what you said about post-traumatic growth.
Mm.
And I think we have this tendency to achieve a goal and instantly move on. We don't celebrate, we don't reflect, we might not even consider what we've learned from achieving that goal. Do you have some advice on this topic? Like what can we do to try to mitigate that post-traumatic growth in the negative light and really use it to accelerate?
Yeah, so when I had a challenging work experience, okay, my last 3 years in the corporate world, I was working with a very challenging boss, okay? It took me 3 years to name the behavior as bullying. And when I came out, I didn't want to leave because I'm a platoon commander. I don't quit, right? Why should I quit? He should, right? And that's who I was. And I was determined to kind of make it a success. And I very quickly learned you can't change someone that doesn't want to change. And, then I tried to change myself and I realized, I basically became sick because I wasn't being true to my strengths. And I was in post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, remember interviewing for other CMO roles, and I was offered amazing roles. And every time I sniffed just a little bit of politics, I'm like, okay, I'm out of here. And, this notion of post-traumatic growth, when I did my studies with Tal Ben Shahar, I came across this concept and I was really fascinated. So what needs to happen to evolve to post-traumatic growth, right? And the first is to realize your pain. Okay. In my case, talking about it, writing about it was extremely therapeutical. So sadly, everybody hurts sometime, right? So instead of trying to be, this strong person that hides everything in, identify your pain points, right? Sit with them for a while. It's okay. It's instead of just jumping back, take some time before to recognize, okay, what happened here? We learn to fail or we fail to learn. So what was it? And sometimes I took it very personally, right? And, and I learned that, failure is not a badge. Okay. It's a specific, in this case, I was trying to mentor up someone that didn't want to change. And we had a total clash of personalities, and I should have left much earlier. Right. So for me, the fact that I didn't manage to change my manager was a huge failure. Right. Because I was always highly appreciated, loved, and it became like, I became so dependent on external validation. That was one of my key learnings. It's where all my value was dependent on one person, and that one person was determined not to give me positive feedback. He actually told me, I'm not going to tell you positive feedback because I feel it's a waste of time, right? And yet I became a junkie, like, working towards this external validation. So one of the big learnings for me was to say, okay, that's him, it's his story. Okay, it doesn't mean, I started to have this imposter syndrome. Maybe these 17 years where I was top rated in P&G, maybe that was luck, right? So I always say, if it happened to me, despite 17 years, right, it can really happen to anyone. So that's why I always say, sit with it, understand, writing about it is extremely helpful. It's been shown in research that, talking about things can be good, but sometimes you're just living the pain. Writing about it brings in a whole analytical skills. What exactly went on there? What was my role? What had nothing to do with me? And it took me a while to say, a lot of it, some of it was me, okay? I was a personality that, we didn't fit, okay? I also was so determined to get external validation that at some stage, I didn't perform the way I used to perform because I was so busy defending myself. So some of it was me, and it was kind of taking responsibility, but realized 95% of it was not, and just letting go of that, right? So that's kind of a first element there. And then starting to see opportunities. You know, someone asked me in an interview a few days, what would happen if you see your bully boss, you know, in the streets? And I was like, I froze for a moment. I didn't know what to say. And today I would really say thank you in a weird way. Not that I wish it on anyone else, but seeing the difference between what makes, you know, my experience in P&G and what made a great experience versus what was so challenging later on helped me understand, you know, what does it mean to be a good people leader? And yeah, sometimes you learn from the painful experience as much, if not more. So post-traumatic growth is to understand those situations, to analyze them, and then to see opportunities and, you know, build yourself up, build your energy up. And today, you know, that became my mission, to help others make sure that it doesn't happen to them, to share for my knowledge, to give back. And, you know, that sense of mission really helped me, you know, climb up from what was a post-traumatic stress disorder. And I think there is relevancy to anyone listening, because people say, oh, you have such an amazing story. I'm like, you know, crap, we all have amazing stories. You know what? We all have our ups and downs. We all have, you know, and sometimes it's those downs that when you're at it, you're kind of ready to die, right? But take some time, go behind the waterfall is a concept I like to use, right? When we're in the waterfall, the emotions are like pounding on our head. You know, I am angry. I am frustrated. Try and go behind the waterfall to say, who? I have anger. I have frustration. Why? Right? And when you go behind that waterfall and you're able to breathe in, and you suddenly realize that, you know, there's all these learnings that come in. So I just want to encourage everyone to think about, even if you're in a tough time, and COVID was such a challenging time, but also such an amazing opportunity. You know, the Chinese call, you know, the basically the opportunity, sorry, a crisis has double meaning. It means danger, but it also means inflection point. And I just learned that it's the same in Hebrew. The word for crisis in Hebrew is mashber. Not many people know, but when you look in the Bible, the word mashber appears in connotation with the last stage before birth, or birth canal. Amazing, right? So even, you know, when we look at kind of ancient languages, we see that, you know, crisis can be an amazing inflection point. And I am really hopeful that COVID helped us understand so many things. I mean, it helped us gain perspective on what's important in life. It's, on the one hand, was a no night, no day digital kind of connection that forced us to understand the importance of stepping out and taking a digital detox and spending time with people we love, and spending time and appreciating, you know, friends and nature, etc. So I am really hopeful that, you know, many of those learnings I put in the book way before COVID, right? But COVID, actually, I personally used to work a day a week from home. When my eldest was born, I went to my manager at the time, Daniela Riccardi, back in Moscow, and I said, is there any chance that I can work from home? Because it was like 3 hours commute in the snow. And she said to me, Dalia, I don't care if you work from the moon, as long as the work is delivered. And, you know, I actually I become emotional really easily. I remember that I actually became a role model for working from home, and I wrote about it. And I remember I brought it back, you know, and I spoke with HR managers in Israel, and they're like, oh, we'll never do that here. We are face people. And COVID forced us. And I think, you know, where I personally, when I worked from home, I was so grateful for the company that I worked 10 times harder. I was so focused. You know, we know that multitasking reduces productivity, and working from home just made me, sometimes I would forget to eat. But then when my kids came home, I was there. So that's kind of some of the learnings that I hope, you know, COVID brought about. And that's kind of what I hope will stay from the book and from, you know, COVID learnings.
Yeah, that was, oh, so many good things that you said there. And about the post-traumatic growth, when you were really experiencing one of the biggest highs in your career, and the people part is what can really, take you down. And you chose to learn from that experience, and in reflection, have all of these revelations that you can share with us today that I know will help lead her forward, and that I think are opening a lot of eyes as we're listening to you, considering a bully boss and considering what impact that might have on your career and how that might create that awful imposter syndrome feeling when it's not valid. It might be something that's externally coming your way. So, oh man, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I'm wondering if your suggestion of having a best friend at work could help with some of the topics that we've been talking about.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, right, the research shows that the number one driver is relationship. And then Gallup did the same research for the workplace. And they said, okay, what's the number one driver of happiness? And it's called the Q12 kind of research. Why? Because question number 12 was, do you have a best friend at work? And, CEOs were like, what is this stupid question? Let's take it out. And every time they took it out, the data kind of, came back to the fact that the number one driver of happiness at work is having a best friend at work. And number two is having good friends at work. Right? Because, friends help you share the load. And it's known your loyalty is not to the company, it's to the people you work with. And I think reflecting on my experience, the 3 challenging years, all throughout, I had very strong women networks. I was actually, when I became a mom, I joined the Geneva Women's Network. And then later when I moved to Moscow, I actually established the women's network in Moscow and later on in Singapore. And it was a simple format. We would just meet up once a month to talk about challenges that we've been through. And I think the podcast that you're doing, answers a similar need in the sense of it's just listening to other women and their tips and advice. Not everything would work for you, but I remember I listened to so many and I would take, what worked for me, right? And create my own kind of coping strategies. And those women networks were amazing kind of support groups. And I myself, as a, head of the women's network, I helped at least 5 women get rid of a bully in the workplace. Okay. And yet when it happened to me, I was almost like a frog in boiling water. Or, I kept on saying, I can deal with it. I'm a tough cookie. I know how to deal with it. I can change it, right? So I think that's really important. And at that stage, I didn't have that many close friends in the workplace because the culture became quite toxic very quickly. I mean, there were some great people and some of them are friends with me in a sense until today. But the atmosphere, in a toxic environment, often it's a command and control and silo environment. So kind of everyone was working their own kind of focus areas. So I didn't have that same level of support that I had previously in my career. And I think that was the first issue. And that's the issue that many senior women face today, that they don't have enough, mentors, role models, and peers. And I think we as women have an immense power when we collaborate, when we share. So if you're out there and you're feeling, oh, I actually don't have a best friend at work, take the time to invest in it. Okay. It's called creating the emotional bank account. Just find a lady or a man, right? It doesn't really matter. Many of my best friends at work were actually, male colleagues. Take them out for lunch without any agenda, right? Just get to know them as human beings, their family, their life, invite them for dinner with their family, build this emotional bank account that will, enable you to share a little bit more of your burdens. And, sharing is caring, right? So I think really kind of the thought there is, how can you individually, but also you as a leader, foster these relationships, get to know your people as people, invest in this emotional bank account, so that you sometimes, if you would need to make a withdrawal, right, you have enough positive relationship with the people around you.
Yeah, and you're filled with so much incredible advice. It's no wonder why you wrote this incredible book with a foreword by Sheryl Sandberg, I have to say. What drove you to write the book? Was it this culmination of this research and these experiences?
It's so funny. Every time because I used to give talks quite often, and every time people say, "Oh, that's amazing. Do you have anything written?" So I kind of had it in my back of my mind that I need to kind of write all the thoughts down. But I guess the story, and I talk about it in TED, that really propelled me was, this challenge in Boston. Specifically, I'll tell you just a tale of two cities. So when I started my career, 6 months into the job, I kind of was in my manager's office because one of the launches hit a wall. And, I became so angry and frustrated that a tear appeared in my eye. Okay. I'm an associate brand manager. I'm in my manager. He wasn't my manager. He was my manager's manager. And I'm crying, right? How embarrassing. I was frantically trying to regain my composure. Now my GM, Jim Lafferty, who's a friend and mentor until today, he smiled at me and he gave me a box of tissues. And when I finally managed to regain my composure, he looked me dead in the eye and he said something I'll forever remember. He said, "Dalia, don't you ever be embarrassed for crying in the office again. It's a sign of your passion, and passion is your superpower." And then he added, "And if you ever work for someone that doesn't appreciate that, walk away. They don't deserve you." Wow. I was so empowered. And 17 years in P&G, I had many managers like Jim that believed in me, sometimes more than I believed in myself. But it wasn't until I reached the lowest point that I really understood what he was talking about. So fast forward 17 years, I decided to leave P&G. Okay. They wanted me back in Geneva. My husband opened the company. I got a role as a CMO Asia in another Fortune 500. I don't mention the name because it's irrelevant. The company was great. I love the CEO. I love the global CMO. But 2 months into the role, I got a manager that, as I mentioned, couldn't have been more different to me, right? I was all about passion and creativity, and he was all about numbers and scorecard and ROI. And most days it was ROI or you die kind of feeling. Anyway, that day I was in his office. He summoned me into a meeting and he started giving me feedback. Now I love feedback. Okay. In P&G, we used to call it tough love. I'm Israeli, straight, get to it. Don't sugarcoat it. Tell me as it is. But, feedback that comes from a position of care, right? I can tell you there was no love that day. It was just tough, denigrating, humiliating. And I'm holding it in because now I'm a C-suite woman, right? And then he starts humiliating my team. And that's when, my frustration mounted. And I was so angry and frustrated because it was so unfair that a tear appeared in my eye. Now, that moment he smiled and he offered me a box of tissue. And for a moment, I had that warm, fuzzy feeling, right? Remembering Jim. But then I lifted my eyes and I noticed something almost evil in the smile. And he turned around the tissue box, and on the other side of that tissue box was a handmade sticker he prepared in advance, which read Dalia's tissue box. I gave a lecture once to 7,000 women, and they all went like that. And that's how I went. I was like, "Are you kidding me? This is an HR assault." And he leaned back and he said, "Oh, Dalia, stop being so emotional. It's just boy banter. I know you have a sense of humor." Now, as I mentioned, right, despite me being this feisty little one, I was determined to change. And I learned very quickly, you can't change someone that doesn't want to change. And then I tried to change myself, right, to fix everything he thought needed fixing. And I fell physically sick because I felt like I left my heart and my art at the doorway. And what happened in the third year is that I said to myself, what is this weird emotion of fear? I never had fear in my life. I'm going to drop that. I'm going to focus on what I'm good at, which is people and creativity. Doesn't matter what it says. And lead with, like myself, with passion and authenticity. And it's only when I went back to being myself that I was able to succeed. And when I came out, I said to myself, what a waste of human potential, right? Think how much waste is happening in the market. And that's when I decided to go and study it. And the numbers, it's crazy. The percent of employees that experience bullying in the workplace. 1 in 5 employees experience workplace bullying, full-on bullying. And then another 20% see it. And it also creates a psychological impact. And the cost is huge, not only psychologically, the whole environment, people mirror a bully boss, so it affects. And I guess that story, those 3 years that was so challenging, those were kind of my driver in a sense to write the book. And I first started with the TED Talk, and I can tell you the TED Talk went out in 2019, and I got thousands of calls by women that stood up for bullying, from men that suddenly had one guy called me to say one of his employees started crying in the office, and usually he would be so embarrassed, he wouldn't know what to say. And thanks to the TED Talk, he said to her, "Wow, I see you're really passionate. How can I help?" So he had kind of an answer. But the craziest call I got from a guy in Australia who told me, "Dalia, I saw your TED Talk. I realized I'm a bully. What do I do?" Right? So that kind of, and in the book, I have like a section, a bully eradication program. If you know of someone that needs to read this book, write to me. I'm giving out 100 books free a year. Because sometimes it's just a lack of awareness. And sometimes you need this kind of wake up call to say, hey, I can try a different approach. And, research shows it's just so much more productive.
Your stories, it's no wonder why you're an author, a speaker, you're a storyteller. And I think we all are really learning a lot from hearing from you. And I can't imagine how much we will take away from reading your book. And I know we have to let you go soon so that you can have Friday night dinner with your family in Israel. But before I do, tell us a little bit about what life is like in your country. I know you recently moved back and you've lived, it sounds like, all over the world. So if we visit, where should we go?
Well, it's a crazy country. It's hot and people are hot. People are warm. It's it's funny. My kids weren't born here, and when I landed, my son was about 8. I took a taxi ride, and the taxi driver started telling me his troubles, and I ended up giving him some money, and we were just such good friends at the end of 20 minutes drive. And when we got out, my son was like, "Do you know him? Where do you know him from?" I said, "I don't. I just met him." And that was like, whoa. But I think, Israel actually appears number 11 on the happiness scale. And when you look into the data, it's the comradeship. So there's something really, really warm. So anyone who comes from abroad, on the one hand, there's no politeness. People are very direct. That can be quite overwhelming for someone. There's no thank you, or, it's just straight there. But don't be, taken aback by it. People are just extremely direct here, but also people are very warm. And I think that makes it very special. So the more you can live, the other thing is that a very diverse country, both kind of geographically and kind of from a political reality, religions, Baha'i, Arab, Israeli, Christian, it's holy for so many religions. So, see, of course, the religious sites, but try and see it as a local, spend time in a cafe, getting to know people and the dynamics. I think that would be, the most amazing. I actually thought I would come back to Tel Aviv. I ended up coming back to the north of the country on the shores. And I can tell you the community is like, amazing. We're actually going to have now a Friday night dinner with about 60 people because that's how it is here. So
Wow.
yeah, just come visit. I think if not for the political environment, this is a haven. And I do hope, all our neighbors get to live peacefully. I think that's the only kind of sad thing, challenging element about living here. But I am hopeful. I think in general, I believe in human relationship, and one of my initiatives. So all the profit from the book goes towards Lead Like a Girl School for the underprivileged. And we do have a program of Arab Israelis, and we are going to do a conference, in 3 years, because I think if we only connect to our hearts more, we can solve a lot of the world issues across the globe. So that is what I'm going to leave you with on this Friday evening. Connect to the heart and dare. And I think that's the other important element of the book. originally it was kind of lead like a girl, but I decided to call it dare to lead like a girl. And I'll just say something about this, as we close off, that courage is sometimes the most misunderstood concept. People understand it to mean, making decisions others don't, or going ahead of everyone. But the word courage actually comes from the French word cœur, which means heart, because the real courageous leaders lead from the heart. And that's kind of the key, because courage is not the absence of fear. I think that's another important dimension for all of you listening there, saying, oh, but you're so courageous. We all have fears. Oh my God, I have tons of fears. And actually, there's a whole chapter where I talk about fears in the book, and I share very personally some of my fear of failure, fear of success, imposter syndrome. We all have our fears. Key is to recognize your fears, connect to your superpowers, and then dare to lead like a girl.
Oh, wow. This has been such an amazing, beautiful, inspiring conversation with Dalia Feldheim. Dare to lead like a girl, how to survive and thrive in the corporate jungle. Thank you for sharing your voice and your messages and your stories and your advice with us on Leadership is Female podcast.
Thank you. And I'm so excited for this podcast. I'm so excited to anyone who buys the book and reads it. Please do share your thoughts. I think we're on a mission here. And yeah, we can change the world together. So let's do it.